Don't fall for this number one mistake when determining your after repair value. I know with confidence that most real estate investors don't know how to properly determine the after repair value of their flips. If you don't know me, my name is Jason Balin from Hard Money Bankers. We've been actively lending for over 19 years. So since 2007, we've done over 4,000 projects and I do about 20 loans per month. So today I'm going to break down the 3 important lessons that I've learned about understanding how to ARV a property. Number 1, how to properly determine an ARV. Number 2, how to be very careful about certain cities and other key areas, and some case studies that we've funded where buyers have lost a ton of money very unnecessarily, and you don't need to make those mistakes either. I'm going to share my screen with you, but first, if you want to work with Hard Money Bankers, maybe you have an upcoming project, I'll just put a link below in the first comment of this video. Okay, so let's get started. After repair value mistakes suck the profits out of every good deal. Do not let this happen to you. Here's a typical deal that you might see in your local area. This is a particular property that's in Baltimore, Maryland, and it's an older style property. And an area like this is very hard to determine the after repair values. Now remember, comparable sales are sold properties, not active properties, sold properties. You don't want to be using properties that are currently listed. We're in a market right now where things have appreciated over time and people want to be a little bit emotional on what they believe the property values are. You need to use sold comps, 3, 4 recently sold comps. And honestly, if you're in the suburbs, some of these projects are easier to compared to the city, where you might only be able to go block by block or street by street, instead of a neighborhood where you can go out, a third of a mile. So what to improve when you are valuing a property or when you're renovating a house to base things off of an after repair value. Now remember, an after repair value is different for many different people. Are you going to max out this property? Are you going to stage this property? Are you going to, flip this thing? You're going to hold it as a rental property. So you really got to understand when you're comparing other properties, what your plan is with this particular one. Let's just assume or another option is, are you going to rip out everything and almost make it new construction? Let's just assume for this purpose that you're going to do a full gut renovation and you're going to end up having it staged, right? So obviously you want to improve, the important parts, the kitchens, the bathrooms, the fixtures, the flooring, the siding, the roof, the things like that. Now, obviously, if you're in an area that has older properties like pre-1970s where they didn't have a lot of big closets, you might want to consider adding newer closets and making bigger rooms. That's what people want, more modern things these days. You also got to determine your experience level. And what do I mean by that? So if you've never flipped a property and you're comparing a property to a big rehabber that does 100 deals a year, chances are they're going to get a higher after repair value than you are, because they're going to know everything down to what color the door should be. And you just don't have that experience. And that's okay. You need that, but you got to be reasonable in that and know that stuff going in, that chances are their properties are going to sell for a premium when yours might just sell for a little bit over, regular retail of a nice livable house. And that's okay. So, if you're in price points where these are, high-end properties, there's a little bit more variance, right? A 10% price cut on $1 million property is $100,000 compared to a price cut and a $300,000 property that's only $30,000. Could that 10% price cut make or break your deal? Things to really consider. At higher price point areas, you got to do, Viking appliances. You got to do high-end everything. Lower end areas, you might not have to do high-end everything. So you really got to do your own due diligence to determine what investors are putting and what homeowners are expecting in certain properties. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, in a lot of cities, homeowners want club basements or fully finished basements. And if you're coming from maybe the landlord world and only working with tenants, you don't want finished basements in some rental properties. And the reason why is because you want to have access to the major mechanicals, and there could be flooding damages that could be challenging. But a homeowner is going to want that if you're flipping a house to that. And obviously year build, I think year build is the most underlooked, or I should say overlooked, risky thing because overlooked, that's the right word. The most risky thing because a house built before the 40s or 50s, in the 20s or 10s, way more risk than a house that was built in the 70s. Way, way, way more risk. There's so many unknown stuff into that. So again, if you're in older style properties, you got to look out for lead-based paint, right? If you're in most cities these days, they have lead-based paint laws for stuff in the pre-70s. So that has to get taken care of. You got to make sure, that's taken care of. One other big thing is for vacant properties, if you're looking at my screen and then distressed neighbors, that's important because let's say you're buying a townhouse and the next door neighbor's property is vacant and there's vandalism in there and you have a nice, beautiful renovated house, that might be challenging to find an end buyer, right? If that's what you're up against. Same thing with distressed neighbors. I remember a story back in the day. We were doing a loan on a property. Guy fully renovates this house. Super, super nice. It was a semi-detached property, right? So it's two properties, one and one, townhouse and a townhouse right next to each other. Super, super nice renovation. It's on the market for $400,000. He couldn't get the darn thing sold. We were trying to help him with it, talked to some realtors, and the realtor's like, dude, there's a nasty pit bull that lives right next door. And anyone comes to the front yard fence to open it up, the pit bull runs out and chases them. And it's scary, right? Just from that one thing. Super, super nice house. They sold for low under market value because of that. Things that have to be taken in consideration. Also, we're in Maryland and Baltimore City's got high tax rates, 2.2%. Right. So that means for every $100,000, their taxes are $2,200 a month. Most homeowners can't necessarily afford a tax bill of that. So that really determines how, you got to take that stuff into consideration compared to maybe like the county, right? If you're in an area we're Baltimore City, Baltimore County, tax rates are almost double in the city. And the school system's a little worse than in the county. So we did a loan for a borrower and he was right on the edge. And we thought it was the county, ended up being the city. Ended up selling it for $50,000 less just because of that. Keep that in consideration, right? Same with CHAP tax credits that some cities have, where in essence, they limit the taxes for a certain period of time. I think it's 10 years in order to make it a little bit more affordable. But you have to do improvements and you have to follow those bylaws, things that you really got to figure out. You got to know your jurisdictions, counties, cities, before you're diving into these projects. All right, let's move on to some case studies because I think everybody learns from case studies. I think that's important to understand things. So look at these two houses, these two townhouses. They're both kind of in the same price point. One's in the county, one's in the city. We've done loans on both of these properties, and the one in the county on the right was built in the 70s. The one on the left was built in 1910. There is some way more risk on that one on the left than the one on the right. In essence, they're same square footage, give or take. But the one on the left, to fully renovate that property, costs $140,000. To fully renovate the one on the right is like $65,000 to $85,000. Very similar style type of property, right? But very, very different outcomes. And a lot of things that you got to take in consideration when you're looking to flip a house. Properties that are built, think about whatever your city you're in and do average age of the house in that city that you're in. Doesn't matter where you are. We overlap in Baltimore, we overlap in Washington, D.C., we overlap in Philadelphia and some other areas. We have the most risk and the most issues with these older style properties because they have so much unknowns that go into these things. Now take a look at this. This is a deal that we did where the borrower lost a lot of money, like almost six figures. We did a loan of $175,000. They brought over $100,000 to the table and they walked away from this thing because this issue happened. They thought that the property was worth significantly more than it was because you see this alley. It's kind of hard to see on the screen. This is the property. This is the property. they thought that they had a parking pad back here. And this is an area of the city that doesn't have any parking or has very challenging parking. And because of that, homeowners need parking because these are all busy streets and they couldn't get to it. So they thought the value of this property was going to be about $60,000 more because the neighboring properties sold for $60,000 more because they had a parking pad. And I know that sounds crazy over parking, but that happened on this deal. And the borrower eventually was like, I'm walking away from this thing. I'm losing my money. I'm out. And that's an unfortunate thing. And honestly, as a lender, we didn't fully catch that either. And, we were able to, get the property, sell to another investor. They made the deal work. Point being is that was a mistake that, they didn't realize that parking was so important in that particular area. One other quick case study. This is a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom. Originally, they went in there. It's a small property. Originally, and this is a good area, and this is actually a decent area, decent to good area. The buyer went in there, thought that they could flip this house, turned into 3 bedrooms. They went in there. The original contractor told them they could. They went to build it out. Historic district came back and said, no, you can only do 2-bedroom out of this thing. They only, they tried to turn a 2-bedroom into this 3-bedroom, and it was like less than 100 square feet. Couldn't even get a bed in that freaking thing. So contractor misled them. They ended up having to turn it back into a 2-bedroom. Oops. Sorry about that. Go back to my other slide. Had to go back to a 2-bedroom, and they lost a ton of money on that thing. Moral of the story, know the deals that you're buying. Know the deals that you're buying. Know the areas that you buy. Stick to areas that you really, really know. I think that's really important. Stick to areas that you know. Start small and work your way up. Maybe do a lipstick on a pig project first, right? If you've ever heard that term. Do a smaller project, work your way up, because you got to understand the after repair value, the true after repair value on these things. And if you don't, you're going to get yourself in a big whirlwind of problems, and you don't want to lose money as a real estate investor. Typical rule of thumb is real estate investors try to make upwards of about 20% of what their costs are. So if they're buying it for $100,000 and it needs $50,000 in work, right? 150 grand, they're trying to make $30,000, right? Because that's 20%. That's typically the rule of thumb. And as the market has gotten more challenging and tighter, investors are willing to go down to 10%. And that's probably still a reasonable margin for the amount of risk, but take that for what it is. Again, like I said earlier, if you want to work with us, I'm Jason at Hard Money Bankers. You have an upcoming project, happy to help. Click on the link below this video and just grab a time on our calendar. Start with that. Thanks so much, guys.